At 4:42 p.m. on March 24, 1944, at an altitude of 22,000 feet over Germany, Sergeant Nicholas Stephen Alkemade was literally on fire. He was only 21 years old. Blonde hair, green eyes, and his uniform was beginning to melt against his skin. The Avro Lancaster bomber in which he served as a rear gunner had just been hit by a German Messerschmitt Bf-109 fighter. The fuel tank exploded. The fuselage broke apart into 3 sections. Nicholas was trapped inside the tail turret, a glass enclosure the size of a coffin. As flames rushed toward him, he had 3 options: stay where he was and burn alive within seconds, reach for the parachute hanging behind him and jump, or jump without a parachute. When he looked back, he saw the parachute engulfed in flames. When he looked down, he faced 22,000 feet of open air. So he did the unthinkable. He jumped, without a parachute, and survived. Nicholas was born on December 10th, 1922, in Loughborough, England, into a working-class family. His father was a mechanic. His mother, a seamstress. He was the youngest of 4 siblings. Slender, 5 feet 8 inches tall, and fascinated by airplanes from childhood. At 8 years old, after watching a biplane perform aerobatics at a local fair, he told his father that one day he would fly. His father laughed. Boys like them fixed machines. They didn't fly them. Nicholas never gave up. In 1940, at just 17 years old, he lied about his age and enlisted in the Royal Air Force as a rear gunner, the most dangerous position on a bomber. Isolated, protected only by thin glass, the first target of enemy fighters. The mortality rate was staggering. 7 out of 10 rear gunners did not survive. Nicholas knew this, and he volunteered anyway. In January 1944, he was assigned to No. 115 Squadron RAF, based at Wychford. He flew aboard an Avro Lancaster Me-3, call sign S for sugar, with a crew of 7 men. Between January and March, they completed 18 missions without casualties. On March 24th, they received mission number 19, Bomb Berlin. Berlin was the most heavily defended target in Europe, protected by thousands of anti-aircraft guns, searchlights, and night fighters. Nearly half of the bombers sent on these missions never returned. Before climbing into the tail turret, Nicholas touched the photograph of his fiancée, Pearl, tucked into his pocket. They planned to marry in June. The Lancaster took off at 4:03 p.m. at 22,000 feet with temperatures of 40 degrees Celsius outside and 35 degrees Celsius inside the turret. Nicholas shivered despite his thermal gear. Sitting in a cramped compartment, he manned 4.303 Browning machine guns, guarding the rear of the aircraft. At 4:42 p.m., already over German airspace, he heard the warning over the intercom: enemy fighters. 6 o'clock. 3 Messerschmitt Bf-109s approached in formation. Nicholas waited until they closed in, then opened fire. The first fighter exploded midair. The second was hit and spiraled down. The third attacked from above, an angle impossible to defend, and struck engine number 2. The explosion rocked the aircraft. Nicholas slammed his head and began bleeding. Over the intercom, the pilot shouted for the crew to prepare to bail out. To reach his parachute, Nicholas would have to unlock the turret, crawl through a narrow passage, put on the gear, and jump. About 90 seconds, he started moving. Then a second explosion. The fuel tank sent a fireball through the fuselage. The heat was instant. His uniform began to melt. He looked back. The parachute was gone, completely consumed by fire. The aircraft was spinning out of control. He had seconds left. Nicholas chose a fast death over burning alive. He unlocked the turret, crawled through the flames, opened the side hatch, and jumped. At 4:37 p.m., Nicholas was falling at nearly 125 miles per hour, in full free fall, with just over 2 minutes until impact. He didn't close his eyes. He watched the Lancaster explode above him. Below, forests and villages rushed upward. The wind crushed his chest, stealing his breath. He thought of Pearl, of the wedding that would never happen. And then he felt something unexpected. Peace. The decision was made. There was nothing left to do. He closed his eyes and waited. At 4:52 p.m., Nicholas hit the ground at approximately 120 miles per hour and woke up. He was buried in 6 feet of snow in a pine forest. On the way down, his body had struck tree branches that reduced his speed, passed through treetops that spread the impact, and finally landed sideways in freshly fallen, soft snow. The statistical probability of this exact combination was estimated at 1 in 5 million. Nicholas had a twisted ankle, 3 broken ribs, second-degree burns on his face and hands, a deep cut on his forehead, and severe hypothermia. But he was alive. He remained there for more than 3 hours, until he heard German voices. Luftwaffe soldiers found him and transported him to a prisoner of war camp in Meppen. During interrogation by Captain Hans Weber, Nicholas was questioned about his parachute. He explained that it had burned. Weber didn't believe him. A full investigation followed. Medical examinations, searches for the parachute, analysis of the Lancaster wreckage, inspection of the impact site. Nothing contradicted Nicholas's account. The parachute hooks were melted. Charred fabric was found. The snow showed clear impact marks. Broken branches were visible above. Other survivors confirmed it. The rear gunner's parachute had been destroyed. Convinced, Weber issued an official certificate on March 29, 1944, stating that Nicholas had survived a fall from 22,000 feet without a parachute, an unprecedented event. Handing over the document, Weber said no one would believe him after the war. The certificate would prove the truth. Nicholas spent 14 months as a prisoner of war at Stalag Luft 3. He walked with a limp and never attempted to escape. Among the prisoners, he became a living legend. Liberated in May 1945, he returned to England weighing just 112 pounds, bearing permanent scars, and carrying the folded certificate in his pocket. At home, few fully believed the story. Even Pearl had doubts. So Nicholas requested an official investigation by the RAF. The Royal Air Force conducted medical evaluations, reviewed flight records, performed physical calculations, and confirmed the German certificate. In September 1945, the RAF officially concluded that Nicholas Alkemade had survived a complete free fall without a parachute, the only documented and verified case from that altitude. The story spread worldwide. Newspapers, magazines, books, documentaries, and recognition in the Guinness Book of Records. Later scientific studies identified the critical factors. Deceleration by tree branches deep, soft snow a sideways impact angle young physiology, and mild hypothermia, which reduced metabolism. Without any one of these, Nicholas would not have survived. Nicholas married Pearl in 1946. They had 2 daughters and lived a quiet life, far from the spotlight. Every March 24th, he visited a forest, looked up at the sky, and thanked the trees, the snow, and chance itself. In his final interview, he revealed that during the fall, he accepted death, and that acceptance brought peace. Psychologists later suggested that this relaxation may have helped his body absorb the impact. Nicholas Alkemade died in 1987 at the age of 64 from lung cancer. At his funeral, alongside friends and fellow veterans, stood the son of Hans Weber. Nicholas had kept Weber's letter, the German certificate, and Pearl's photograph until the very end. Today, his story is remembered in memorial plaques, museums, books, and scientific studies, not because it changed the course of the war, but because it proves that the impossible can happen. Nicholas Alkemade fell from the sky and survived. And in doing so, he showed that decisions matter, that acceptance is not surrender, and that even enemies can recognize the truth. Sometimes, falling is the only way to fly.